Josiah Renews the Covenant. 2 Kings chapter 23.
Kings chapter 23. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the prophets, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. The king ordered Hilkiah the high priest, the priests next in rank, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal and Asherah, and all the starry hosts. He burned them outside Jerusalem, in the fields of the Kidron Valley, and took the ashes to Bethel. He did away with the idolatrous priests appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem, those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry hosts. He took the Asherah pole from the temple of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, and burned it there. He ground it to powder, and scattered the dust over the graves of the common people. He also tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the temple of the Lord, the quarters where women did weaving for Asherah. Josiah brought all the priests from the towns of Judah, and desecrated the high places, from Geba to Beersheba, where the priests had burned incense. He broke down the gateway at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the city governor, which was on the left of the city gate. Although the priests of the high places did not serve at the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, they ate unleavened bread with their fellow priests. He desecrated Topheth, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so no one could use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to Molech. He removed from the entrance to the temple of the Lord the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the room of an official, named Nathan-Melech. Josiah then burned the chariots dedicated to the sun. He pulled down the altars the kings of Judah had erected on the roof near the upper room of Ahaz, and the altars Manasseh had built in the two courts of the temple of the Lord. He removed them from there, smashed them to pieces, and threw the rubble into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the high places that were east of Jerusalem on the south of the hill of corruption. The one Solomon, king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the vile goddess of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the vile god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the people of Ammon. Josiah smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles and covered the sites with human bones. Even the altar at Bethel, the high place made by Jeroboam son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin, even that altar and high place he demolished. He burned the high place and ground it to powder, and burned the Asherah pole also. Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw the tombs that were there on the hillside, he had the bones removed from them and burned on the altar to defile it, in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by the man of God who foretold these things. The king asked, "What is that tombstone I see?" The people of the city said, "It marks the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and pronounced against the altar of Bethel the very things you have done to it." "Leave it alone," he said. "Don't let anyone disturb his bones." So they spared his bones and those of the prophet who had come from Samaria. Just as he had done at Bethel, Josiah removed all the shrines at the high places that the kings of Israel had built in the towns of Samaria, and that had aroused the Lord's anger. Josiah slaughtered all the priests of those high places on the altars, and burned human bones on them. Then he went back to Jerusalem.
During Josiah's reign in Judah, The Book of the Covenant, containing some or all of the Pentateuch, was found in the temple. Josiah was terribly grieved when he heard what it said and how its commands and warnings had been disobeyed and neglected. His reforms begin with the covenant renewal ceremony that stands in the tradition of great renewals, such as the one Deuteronomy itself represents and the one Joshua initiates. Joshua chapter 24, verse 1 through 27. To begin with, we need to think about Baal. Baal is the Canaanite storm god and bringer of rain. As the storm god and bringer of rain, Baal was recognized as sustaining the fertility of crops, animals, and people. Followers often believed that sexual acts performed in his temple would boost Baal's sexual prowess and thus contribute to his work in increasing fertility. Baal was a part of the religion of virtually every culture of the ancient Near East. He appears under many names, including those indicating his location in a particular temple, such as Baal Peor. Those representing a specific culture, such as Chemosh, the name used by the Moabite, and those attributing praise to him, such as Baal Berith, meaning Baal of the Covenant. When it comes to stuff around the house, are you more of a keeper or a tosser? Why did Josiah read the entire book of Covenant to the people of Judah? They had never heard it. They had forgotten it. They needed to hear it. Or they were breaking it. When Josiah and the people renewed the covenant, what were they committing themselves to do? To obey the rules and regulations in the book, to follow the Lord, to change their ways, to recommit their lives. Why were the people willing to give up their idolatry? They feared the wrath of God. They had made a pledge. Josiah's convictions inspired and motivated them. They did whatever the king said. What was Josiah accomplishing by destroying everything having to do with other gods? Removing all temptation, teaching the people a lesson, fully obeying the covenant, avoiding any compromise. Judah renewed the covenant and pledged themselves to it. What do you try and live by? Common sense? The golden rules? The Ten Commandments? The Sermon on the Mount? The Bible as a whole? God's grace? Other. How much repair work would getting your life in line with God's expectations require now? A little fine-tuning? A regular tune-up? Major repairs? A complete overhaul? Point to ponder. Josiah determines to attempt to lead the whole nation to true conversion to the Lord. This attempt begins with a covenant renewal ceremony that stands in the tradition of great renewals, such as the one Deuteronomy itself represents and the one Joshua initiates, Joshua chapter 24, verse 1 through 27. First to remember, the king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. 2 Kings 23, verse 3. Questions to consider. In what area of your life do you feel God wants you to act on His word and make changes? Silently consider any confession you need to make to yourself, God, or others.